something that is definitely not human-made, I think that information should be shared with the public. There is no reason to hide it because we are all in the same boat. And just imagine, it's very analogous to a family living at home and thinking, having no clue whether they have neighbors down the street. And then you go out to the backyard and you notice a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. And then the question...
What do you prefer? To have people saying things that saw and we have a mobile or whatever without any evidence? Which is better? To have something with evidence and with evidence scientifically analyzed, and then we can say, okay, this is real, or nothing. Maybe they don't have anything and all those UAPs are human. Who knows, man? Who knows? Hopefully not, but who knows?
5 billion times before the Vatican even existed. So the fact that it was popular within the Vatican to assume that the sun moves around the earth did not change the fact, that the earth moves around the sun. Hey. So, 350 years after Galileo died.
Who is putting the ducks there?
Data, for example, from spacecraft looking at the earth moving around the sun. I mean, it would have been foolish for them to continue to insist on the other view. So the way that science arrives eventually at the truth is by collecting enough data so that it would be foolish for anyone to argue otherwise. And we need to get to that point with respect to UAP. Now, I don't know as of now what their nature is. It's still possible that they are human-made. We haven't seen evidence beyond any doubt, and that's why many people are still in doubt. But by collecting more evidence, we can either, at the very least, if you have a down-to-earth view, at the very least, we will help national security if these are human-made objects, because we are helping the Pentagon fulfill its mission. But this is the minimum expectation. And if we find evidence for non-human made technology, obviously everyone on Earth should be aware of that.
Now, what sort of data sets are you going to you have access to? In other words, it was floated by one of the previous directors of Aero to set up instrument packages on, assets, military assets and things like that, air bases and perhaps aircraft carriers, things like that. Is there any possibility of that here, getting those data sets for your analysis?
Yeah, of course, that's very relevant. I mean, that's in the spirit also of the Galileo project that I'm leading. We built 3 observatories with an advanced...
We'll see what they allow him to grab and watch and analyze. We'll see that.
Of course, by Aero, and they have a parallel program. So indeed, we can encourage them to collect data of particular types. We can...
It feels like many people want to extend the carrot in front of the donkey. And if Avi Loeb is allowed to do his job, he will find something, whether this is all human, whether this is human, this is extraterrestrial, and you will be the one to announce it. But it seems that there's many people out there that don't want that to happen, that want to keep that carrot in front of the donkey, because it's that carrot in front of the donkey that lubricates the narrative they have, which is not in line what Avi Loeb does.
Evidence,
my opinion.
Beyond any doubt, that would resolve the issue very quickly. But I haven't seen it as of now, so I don't know what to make of it. It's still possible that we're dealing with retrieval and reverse engineering projects from crash sites of human-made technologies. So just imagine airplanes falling down in a battlefield. Of course, you want to retrieve them and figure out the technologies. Of course, you have biologics there. And of course,
thank you so much,
you might, the intelligence might use some code names for those and call them aliens, and then someone looks at the document and thinks that they recovered real aliens. So that's always a possibility that could trigger some confusion. And until I see the evidence directly, I would not necessarily believe the narrative in Steven Spielberg's movie, where he actually shows at the end, the conclusion of the film, he shows bodies of aliens and videos of those that were in possession of the US government.
Fernanda Perez 8418 asks, if an advanced extraterrestrial civilization wanted to contact humanity, why would it choose governments or the UN rather than communicating directly with individuals, given that no institution truly
can choose us? The serenity
represents everybody. In other words,
can you imagine?
Why not talk directly to
live
all of us,
Yeah,
as opposed to a government or the UN?
Well, of course, the only reason the government may have useful data is because they monitor the sky and the oceans for national security purposes. If you think about the defense budget, you know, it's $1 trillion. That's a factor. It's 99% of our.
That's the problem that I asked him. If somebody says to you, well, this is classified, and he said, if it's classified, then national security, I can't tell. By law, he's not allowed, but it's not him and everyone else, you see. But maybe this can pull the whistleblowers to a better place as well. I'm positive. I don't think that, no, I think this will help to find the truth. And it's what I want. And you as well, no? We are not here for narratives and, you know, we are here for the truth.
And the astronomers were thrilled to use them in an upcoming mission, the Nancy Grace Roman Observatory. But this just illustrates how far the scientific community is behind the intelligence agencies.
You see, there's people here in the chat. His chat. Government is using you to distract and confuse us. This is a legit hypothesis that it's legit that people might have. We don't trust them, and imagine we trust Avi Loeb. We don't trust them. Avi Loeb is working under their monitoring. It's legit, and he knows that. The problem is not that. The problem is the attacks and the insults. You know,
in particular, the
bad
U.S.
behavior.
government, which spends about a third of the military budgets worldwide, to be the first to notice something unusual. And there are examples in the past of the US government making discoveries for astronomy. For example, in the late 1960s, there was a program called the Vela satellite program to monitor gamma ray flashes from nuclear explosions above the atmosphere. That the suspicion was that the Soviet Union would test nuclear weapons, even though they signed a ban on such tests. And therefore, there was an attempt to verify.
We'll watch that. We'll monitor that. If that occurs, that you are saying there in the chat, we'll watch that.
Flashes of gamma rays, the gamma ray bursts. And so for several years, they looked into the data and then realized that it's actually coming from the universe. And so then in 1972, there was a scientific paper by people in Los Alamos basically saying there are gamma ray bursts coming from the universe. And at first, astronomers thought, maybe it's from the Milky Way galaxy, because otherwise you need a huge amount of energy to be released in an explosion. So they thought maybe they're related to neutron stars, which have strong magnetic fields. But then it was realized that they actually originate from the edge of the universe, these gamma rays, and they represent a huge amount of energy.
The gamma rays.
Of order 10 to the 51 ergs released in a single explosion. That's huge. And we can see those at great distances. It ended up being basically the signals associated with the birth of black holes, stellar mass black holes, when a massive star collapses to make a black hole after it consumes its nuclear fuel. What happens is the material may have some rotation because the star was rotating. And then you have the core of the star making a disk that inspirals to get to the black hole, just like water going down the drain. And then in the process of doing so, there are jets being created perpendicular to that disk. And the jet can drill a hole through the envelope of the star before the star had a chance even to explode. And so you end up with those jets penetrating through the envelope. And if the observer lines up with the axis of a jet, it would appear as a gamma ray flash. So gamma ray bursts were discovered by the US government as it was monitoring the Soviet Union. And those happen to be, the signals from the formation of stellar mass black holes. Quite amazing. So that's one example, but maybe UAP will be the first discovery of non-human intelligence, which would be the biggest discovery ever made by humanity. So I give the government credit. My colleagues do not do that very often. Just to give you another example, the government detected a very bright meteor that was moving very fast back in 2014. And I realized that it's, together with my student, that it moves so fast that it must have originated from outside the solar system. And so that was the first recognized interstellar meteor. We went on an expedition to retrieve materials from it 3 years ago, and there will be a Netflix documentary about it. But my colleagues were giving me a very hard time.
But don't forget, it's true, But don't forget that his scientific council, it's not totally independent, but it's independent from, I mean, there's another group above them that group is the one that belongs to the Gov, not them. They are scientists. He wants to be and stay in the realm of science, but to make the communication with the administration, he has to make the communication with the powers, no?
Identified as UAP depend on how many eyes are looking at the sky, how many sensors are monitoring the sky. And those sensors are mostly clustered around strategic assets of the United States. And so you would expect clustering of the reports around the same places. So highly populated regions or military bases often notice unusual objects.
When you have a lot of people looking at the sky.
Right.
I mean, that's what they do. They're Air Force personnel.
Yes.
Naturally, you see more things are picked up.
Exactly.
But the distribution should be flat everywhere.
Right.
Overall.
Yes, there is no evidence for real clustering. So far, if you cross-correlate the number of reports, there is a very strong correlation with the population or with the number of sensors. And we don't have evidence that those visits are necessarily clustered today.
Okay, we have a lot of questions to ask. So Thomas Stone 7207 says, why haven't we figured out how to capture and use electromagnetic radiation for power or fuel? Surely the effect can be used, and I can think of at least one way we can.
Well, we are using solar panels for exactly that reason, right? We are getting energy from solar radiation, so we definitely use that. In terms of, there is an effort to consider data centers in space, and the idea is that they could be powered.
What's happening?
By sunlight. There is also an attempt, there is a company that suggests to put mirrors in the sky that will channel sunlight also to Earth also during the nighttime. That would be terrible for astronomy because these mirrors will basically illuminate the night sky in a way that would not allow astronomical observatories.
Can you imagine to lose the ability that we had all this time to watch the sky, look up and see the stars? That will be horrible.
Experiments to take advantage
we
of
need
the
that
magnetic field of Earth and things like that to produce energy.
You mean electromagnetic interactions more generally?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are many examples. For example, the geomagnetic storms that are triggered by plumes of plasma, coronal mass ejections from the sun. They carry a magnetic field. They have charged particles. So electromagnetic interactions with the magnetosphere of the Earth generate these beautiful lights, the northern lights that we see. Electromagnetism is everywhere. It's the most significant source of energy that we have, and in fact it's also the best messenger that tells us everything about the universe, Until recently, until 2015, we were using signals from light, from electromagnetic sources, to learn even about the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background. In 2015, we detected for the first time gravitational waves with the LIGO experiment.
No mirror, no mirror.
Since
man.
then, we observed the universe also in gravitational waves. There are other particles like neutrinos that are observed, but it's so far they are not used as a very effective astronomical tool. I mean, every now and then they help us figure out things. We detect neutrinos from the sun, from active galactic nuclei where there are supermassive black holes. But the most important agent that transmits information and energy to Earth is radiation.
All right, Thomas Stone 7207 asks, for years, NASA has said they think Enceladus has life in its ocean. Actually, they say that it might. It has some conditions for it. Maybe they haven't gone to look because if they find it, it would mean life is everywhere. Your thoughts?
Well, the Enceladus has cracks in the surface ice, out of which we see plumes coming out like geysers. These are jets of water vapor. And indeed, we know that there are some complex molecules there, but there was never a mission to examine the fingerprints of life. Because it's possible that under the thick layer of ice, tens of kilometers deep, there is a liquid ocean. This is very likely.
Look, if there's footage, and now what? Now we have technology to watch UAPs more than in the past. So if and we see many UAPs now, if there's extraterrestrial life in form of UAPs close to the Earth here in the skies, and what we film with the mobile, it's extraterrestrial, they have the instruments to check, but it has to be with evidence, not like, look, this is evidence. Here, I have the evidence. Man, it's cool. Might be, but it's not enough for the whole world to confirm scientifically.
That there are very advanced.
We need that evidence
down there, because there is usually, I mean, the theory is that you need an interface between rock, land, and water in order to develop advanced.
In Portugal, a tic-tac today.
John O'Place asks, sorry if you answered this already. What's up with the sensors? You going to be getting your own, military giving you access to theirs, inventing new ones specific to the task?
Yeah, so my hope is that we can recommend that, I mean, once we look at data and decide that the missing information is this and that, you know, we identify what's missing in order to crack down the mystery. We can say, please try to build sensors that will get us this data. If you remember, many of these videos that were released so far had the redacted information in them. And as long as their information is not classified, you know, I think it would be very useful to know the context. What was the camera attached to? What was the distance between the camera and the objects that we're dealing with? If that is known. Having multiple sensors looking at the same object allows also to not only to triangulate and figure out the distance and velocity and acceleration of the object, but also verify that it's a real object and not just an optical illusion. Also it allows to narrow down the possibility of what the object might be. So I would say multi-sensor data would be the most effective in
the problem will be, man, we know all. We know it all, already know. The problem will be, will it be classified or not? And there's a problem there.